Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Joining me as always this time on Wednesday, Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of Red State, the man behind the plan of whatever it is that we're doing here today. I don't know. Waldorf to my Statler, or he's Statler to my Waldorf, one or the other.
What are the others?
Redstate.com,
Yeah.
at AH Malcolm on Twitter. Well, welcome back.
Yeah, happy new administration.
Happy new administration. I have to say, I was a lot more enthused about yesterday than I thought it was going to be. We didn't record yesterday because, of course, we were thinking that we were both going to be busy. And we were watching what was going on and writing about it. But
yesterday being Monday.
Yesterday being Inauguration Day. And of course, it was also Martin Luther King Day. So it was kind of an interesting little juxtaposition there as well. But,
and the new president mentioned it.
He did. Yes, he did. He made reference to Martin Luther King. And they had to move it indoors because we had we didn't have enough global warming apparently in the South.
Yeah,
cold.
Really.
Still is.
Yeah, it was supposed to be down in the teens for them, which they're not ready for that in Washington.
No, and of course, there's a lot of older people there and young kids that it's not healthy to be out in that kind of weather for an extended period of time. I actually like the indoor venue for inaugurations, and I wouldn't mind seeing that be the norm. I don't think it will happen because I think politicians just love the
grandiose, yeah,
exactly, the grandeur of the outdoor inauguration. But I actually thought it worked a hell of a lot better, and I enjoyed it. It was actually kind of enjoyable, especially when Donald Trump gave a public beating to Joe Biden.
Sitting right there.
Oh my God.
Yeah. The last time that happened was Ronald Reagan's second inauguration. And I've been to one inauguration, and that was enough. And I was in the crowd, and it wasn't bitter cold that time. It was cold, but it wasn't bitter cold, and I just can't imagine enduring that. So that was a smart move. And interesting, you mentioned you liked indoors. Trump said today at a signing ceremony how great the ceremony was indoors and how perfect the acoustics were.
Right.
Apparently. And he said maybe we should give that some thought. So we'll see if he won't have another inauguration, but I think you're right. They like the grandeur. And, one of my favorite pictures of all time is Abraham Lincoln giving his second inaugural address just a few weeks before he passed away, and standing in the crowd, and you can hardly find him. There's no stands, but he's on the edge of the I don't know what you call it, like the huge porch of the Capitol, and people all around. And of course, there's no microphones until McKinley and Roosevelt, and Teddy Roosevelt. So can you imagine having to give an address to thousands of people with your own voice? So of course he was used to that. That's all they had when they did the Lincoln Douglas debates in 1840. Was it 48 or 58? It was the same thing, except it was hours long. Each one spoke for an hour a couple of times. So there were challenges. I have a CD, which maybe we can play sometime if you want, of the earliest recordings of presidents. And
interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and William Jennings Bryan in his big, booming, eloquent voice. Of course, they spoke in such grandiloquent sentences. Each sentence had 4 or 5 or 6 clauses within them. It would be challenging to follow them on TV. And as you notice, the sentences may have one clause in them these days, in the speeches. But Teddy Roosevelt has a surprisingly weak voice, which disappointed me. I picture Bull Moose would have a big boomer.
Well,
But
the most interesting voice story, I think, for historical purposes, this isn't even really a precedent, but we all saw the movie Patton, right, with George C. Scott and that gravelly delivery that he has. George Patton had a high-pitched, kind of squeaky voice, which he was always aware of. And he said the reason why he used so much profanity is to make sure that people took him seriously, because he knew his voice alone wouldn't do it. And he says, if I give it to them hard and dirty, they'll remember it. And so yeah, his actual voice was nothing like George C. Scott's. So yeah, now and I think that the thing about William Jennings Bryan, and I think that back then politicians were making speeches mostly for other politicians, right? The party, the party cogs and that sort of thing. I think that, if William Jennings Bryan tried to do that today, he would utterly fail in politics, because people don't want to hear somebody with, in love with the sound of their own voice. They want people who are going to talk to them on their own terms.
That's right, on their own level. Exactly right. Level. Exactly right. And appearances. Remember the picture of John Edwards getting ready for a debate, and he's fixing his hair. You see the pictures of Lincoln. It's just like, okay, take the picture. Because, in those days, you had to sit still. That's why they didn't smile. None of those pictures from the 1800s, people are smiling because they couldn't hold the smile. They could look stern and unhappy for whatever it was, a minute or 2 or 3 minutes. They had to stay still for the exposure. I love those old pictures and the thought of the old voices. And but you're right, television has changed things to well, I think it's lowered the standards in terms of public discourse. But when television was first out, they had sound bites were like 30 seconds, and now a long sound bite is 8 seconds. Of course, you have to know that when you're writing speeches.
Yes, you do. Yeah. People who write speeches have to understand how they're going to be delivered so that you can have those types of pauses. And you can tell the people who are used to that and the people who aren't. Yesterday, for instance, Steve Witkoff did a speech at the rally, right, at the Capital One Arena. And he kept having to stop himself because people wanted to react, and he hadn't built that into his speech. And it occurred to me, I'm glad you mentioned it, because it occurred to me that that's the difference between somebody who's used to doing political speeches, especially for rallies, and somebody who's just used to speaking to the board.
Right. And you could see Trump pause at just the right time. And sometimes the applause was a little late. So he was waiting for the applause, and then the crowd got the message, oh, we're supposed to applaud at this point. And remember Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, they would sometimes read the directions on the teleprompter. And, the directions would say, pause here for applause. And they would just read that as if it was part up there. As if it was part of the speech. It makes them look so stupid.
Well, I mean, that's the Jeb Bush thing, when his joke didn't, and he said, please clap. And it's like, if you have to actually say that, you should just really move on. And this, I think I've talked about this story with you in the past, which was that I was reading something about the Marx Brothers and how they used their vaudeville training to precisely time their jokes in movies. And if you watch a Marx Brothers movie, and I'd still recommend that you do that. If you watch a Marx Brothers movie on TV, it seems a little slow. It seems like the pacing's a little slow, especially between the gags, right? And the reason why it was there is these films were never intended to be watched by one person alone, or in a house. They were, the Marx Brothers were crafting these films for large audiences in movie theaters, and they would use these gags. They would do these gags on stage, for their stage act. and they would time them very carefully to get an idea of how long the laugh would be so that the next laugh didn't get buried by the audience reaction from the previous laugh. And so these guys were masters, right? They were masters at that. And it's probably not as well appreciated today because simply we just don't experience films that way.
Absolutely. And you can tell, for instance, Trump's speech was twice as long in words as his first inaugural address. George Washington's first inaugural address was 1,420 words.
I'm actually surprised that much.
Yeah,
it was famously sort of,
and that was grandiloquent because it's people sitting on a wooden bench. They're not going to want to sit there a long time. And Trump's was 1,431 words. This one was a little over 3,000. And then it was extended. The time was extended. It was like 31 minutes, I think, but that had a lot of applause time within it.
You know, I didn't think it was over long. And I was also very cognizant of the of his discipline in that inauguration speech. I only caught him ad-libbing a couple times and only very, very briefly, just to emphasize something that he had said, right? You know, the typical Donald Trumpism. And you could tell, right? You know,
absolutely.
Off script. And you kind of knew when Joe Biden was off script, but in a much different way.
Most of the time, yeah.
Well, yeah, he had trouble staying on script, but he would get lost. Biden would just get lost. That's how you knew he was not tracking it on the teleprompter any longer. So, but I mean, sorry, but Trump.
Over the shoulder. My wife used to do that when she wanted to show that it didn't really matter. She just motioned like throwing her over the shoulder, and that's what I'm doing to my Biden memories.
Yeah, exactly. I was happy to see them. I was happy to see them go, but which is one.
He did have to stand up once.
What I was struck by was how in your face that speech was, right? And
yes,
no, bless you. But I was kind of half expecting him to do. Oh, I was expecting him to do that during the rallies, right? Talk about how terrible the Bidens were, and you know, it's a new day in America and stuff like that. But I kind of expected, with Biden sort of trapped there, that he would avoid that and just focus on, we're going to do some great things. Thank you so much. You know, really appreciate all this.
Right.
No,
me too.
No. I mean, he let him have it with both barrels. The only thing he didn't do is mention him by name.
Yeah. It's what's his name? Biden often did not mention him by name.
Right.
And it's just, that's even beyond Trump's in your face sometimes. But I thought it was effective, certainly in terms of the smaller audience indoors. And he didn't have to, if you're speaking to whatever it is, 250,000 people, you've got, not only do you pause for applause lines, you have to pause for the words to get out through the loudspeakers. And sometimes you have to pause because you hear your words coming back, the echo. It's an interesting, the mechanics of it are interesting, but I think you're right. The substance of it was clear and blunt. And, but I think it showed he was more experienced this time. There was a signing ceremony at the Capitol, officially signing documents with Democrat and Republican leaders.
Yeah, Amy Klobuchar was there. Yeah.
Pardon?
Amy Klobuchar was there, senator from Minnesota.
Yeah, right, and Schumer and the speaker. And but when it's interesting when you read the transcript, that's where Trump said the indoors, maybe we should look at that. But at the end of it, and I thought this was very revealing about Trump 2.0. At the end of it, there was a pool reporter witness watching, and she squeezed in a question. Said, what's your reaction to President Biden's last minute pardons of the families? And Trump said, he started to say something, and then he stopped and he said, well, I thought it was unfortunate, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Now, 9 years ago, he would have taken that and run with it as a big piece of red meat.
Right.
He would, and that would have destroyed the message that he wanted, the message that his team and he wanted to get out initially. This time, it was an amicable signing, bipartisan, whatever, and Trump didn't fall for it. So to me, that showed a great deal of experience. He does use the media very well, but sometimes they used him to make a story because there was no conflict in a bipartisan signing ceremony where the president is handing pins to Democrats and Republicans. Yeah, there's no conflict, so there's no news. They want conflict, and that's what you have to do now that our news is largely online or visual.
You know, he didn't say anything about the pardons at first, but when he got back to the Oval Office, and this was after the rally, but before the inaugural balls took place. And I didn't watch the inaugural balls because I was kind of tired out by the whole thing by that point in time. I'd had enough winning for the day. I knew that there was going to be more winning, but frankly, I was just tired and I needed to watch something else for a while. He was in the Oval Office, and I found that whole thing really interesting for a couple of reasons. But one was that he did answer what he thought about those pardons and said that he thought it was very bad. I think is a direct quote. Said that he thought that it made the Bidens look guilty, which was an argument that the Biden administration was using towards the January 6th people, that they were warning them that they accepted Donald Trump's clemency action, that they would basically be admitting guilt, and that it set a terrible precedent, and maybe we need to do something about that, or who knows, maybe we'll use that precedent in some other fashion. I didn't do that my first term, which he didn't. In fact, he was actually pretty parsimonious with clemency actions. I think I was researching it yesterday, and I found a website that listed it in order, and in order of clemency actions. And bear in mind that he only had one term, so he's a little low on the scale anyway. But he was
so was Biden.
He was actually Biden wasn't on the list because his term wasn't over when it was compiled. This one maybe counted weeks prior to the end, right? So they didn't list Biden at all. But even without Biden, Trump came in something like 29th out of 45, right?
Yeah.
He only had less than 300 clemency actions as president.
And there was no blanket pardon for Barron in case he did something wrong in the future.
Right, in case he had violated his curfew. In case he didn't pass locker inspection at his private school, he didn't have to issue him a pardon. But I did, he did actually address it later on. I think he was pretty measured in how he addressed it, but he didn't. At that point, it was like, okay, now I can talk about this and tell you it looks terrible, and it is terrible, and
he was on his home turf. Yeah.
Right. But that brings me to the other thing, and Selena Zeta was the first one to point this out, right? Is that this is the first time in 4 years that we had a president in the Oval Office who's actually doing extemporaneous interaction with reporters while he's signing EOs, right? They're asking him about the EOs, and he's answering their questions. And there's a picture that was taken from one side of the room where it shows all of the, on the left side of the picture is all the press. On the right side is the Resolute desk with Trump behind it. And you got all the boom mics and all that kind of stuff. And I think Selena's comment was, this first time in 4 years we've actually seen this. And then
Yeah.
it may have been Axelrod said, that's not true. Joe Biden did it the first day. And somebody went back and looked at the video, and it was they were in the room for 3 minutes and he took one question.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah, that's part of the excitement. I think you were right. You mentioned the excitement. I think it's part of the excitement, the refreshing excitement of the new administration, whether you like them or not. They're what's the word? They're more sentient at the moment.
well, they have
Conscious.
incentives. Yeah, they have incentives to actually, be a little bit more transparent too than they've been in the past. But yes, I mean, you just didn't have that sort of sense. It was almost like we didn't have a president, and I would say maybe even more than just almost. That all of these things were being done
Yeah.
outside of the eyeballs of independent observers, and nobody's
Did
really
you see?
sure Biden
Did you
even.
see the Free Press video of Barry Weiss interviewing Speaker Johnson, and he spoke? I wondered why he didn't tell this story before, but a year ago he was in the Oval Office talking to Biden and asked him, because it was important to Louisiana, why did he stop the liquid natural gas exports? And
Yes.
Biden said, I didn't do that. He said, oh, actually, yeah, you did. Yeah. So, I think you're right. He was just signing things that they put in for your sign this, sign this. Um,
Yeah,
and
that story doesn't reflect well on Johnson either, because Johnson, that was
no, I'd say,
January of last year, and Johnson had ample opportunity to make that an issue, and he should have made it an issue. It's a constitutional crisis if the president is incapacitated in that matter. But they didn't want to do it because
now you could make an argument, I suppose, and maybe he did. You could make an argument that private conversations with the president, but I think something of that serious nature, that would.
it wasn't even a private conversation. He was there in business, right? It's not like
He
it was
was there on business, but it was just he the aide, according to Johnson, the aides were always interrupting and trying to control the conversation. And finally, he said, "Could we just talk, Mr. President?" And Biden asked all the aides to leave the room, and they did. So this was a candor that would not have happened had. It's
well,
just, but it's all. Hey, Ed, over the shoulder.
yeah,
Did you ever see that? Did you ever see The Magician? He says, "This is my impression of juggling on a motorcycle," and he just throws balls over his shoulder.
well, that's kind of the Biden presidency, right?
Yeah,
Which is,
exactly.
just throwing balls over the shoulder and not really caring where they landed. I mean, that's sort of the. I mean, I think the metaphor.
He's probably out on the beach. It's 18 degrees, but he's out on the beach today. He doesn't know.
I think he's at the Shady Acres Rest Home, actually. They're vacationing, which is, after 4 hard years of, vacationing.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, they were on vacation 40% of the time that he was in the White House. And I get that presidents are always on the job, even when they're someplace else. And I used to defend Barack Obama going to Hawaii for that purpose. And when Bush went to Crawford and all that kind of stuff, I would say, look, presidents are presidents, no matter where they're at. They're just, and you got to give them some room to get some rest. But 40% of the time, he was out of that White House 40% of his presidency.
Makes you wonder what was happening at his house and who was visiting that was not documented.
Yeah.
I think that's when he got the juice shots.
Yeah. Also, we can also talk about Robert Hur too, right? And people forget about this, but it was about the same time that Johnson was visiting with Biden, right? I think it was right after that, maybe a month after that. I think it was in February of last year that Robert Hur's special counsel report came out and said that the president's memory is impaired, and a jury would probably not be able to find him liable for for any crimes because he probably wouldn't be able to be, basically was saying he wasn't competent to stand trial. And
which
everybody,
implies, yeah, he's not competent to be president, for Pete's sake.
right.
That's why the administration didn't want that transcript out.
Oh, well, the transcript came out. They didn't want the audio to
Well,
come
at
out.
first they didn't. They didn't want it to come. Yeah, the audio. Yeah.
They didn't have. Well, actually, I'm not sure if the transcript of the interview came out, but hers report came out, and it had portions of the transcript.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the Republicans were trying to get the audio recording of the deposition, and Merrick Garland refused to release it. And I suspect that we might see it now, or honestly, maybe Donald Trump's looking at this and going, "I'm done with this. I've got other things I want to do." Maybe not. He revoked the security clearances of the 51 idiots that signed that letter that said that the Hunter laptop was really just Russian disinformation. Did you see that today?
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think he should.
Yeah, absolutely. These guys manipulated the media, and
and they're supposed to be in the intelligent people.
Yeah.
And they fell for it. They propagated the lies.
Well, yeah, they propagated the lies. Before we get too much farther into it, because we're almost out of time, we got to talk a little bit about your VIP column. We've been talking about the topic. The day is here is the second term of Donald J. Trump. What is it that you were looking at in your VIP column? People need to go read this, obviously, at redstate.com. But what were you looking at yesterday? What was your the keys for you yesterday?
Well, I was trying to anticipate, I think, what we saw in the inauguration, and what the first early part of the administration would look like and be like, based on what we knew in the past. And in many senses, I was right, but in one sense, I wasn't. And that is, if you expected Trump to be this time to be the same as last time, he will look familiar, but it's a savvier Trump.
Yeah, I think it's a savvier Trump. I think he just knew what he needed to do right off the bat, right? Again, he was an outsider and really, I don't think, grasped how important it was to prepare for these things.
And he didn't feel as confident with, he's got people that he trusts now in place. Before, he was kind of taking recommendations, and some of them didn't turn out so well. No,
some of them didn't turn out so well. And, it's possible, may not turn out so well. A couple of them may not turn out so well for him. But the difference between Trump and Biden is that Trump got rid of people that weren't performing for him, regardless of whether it was on a personal basis or on he got rid of Rex Tillerson. He got rid of Jeff Sessions. He got rid of people who just weren't doing the job. And Joe Biden, I don't think, dismissed any of his cabinet members, even though they were failing all over the place. Never got rid of Lloyd Austin. Even after Lloyd Austin went AWOL, he refused to fire him. And I think the reason is that, I just looking back, I think that you have to consider the idea that they were afraid that if they let these guys go, they'd start talking about what it was like, what was
actually like. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they didn't lose a single cabinet member, not one that I can recall. Every single cabinet member that they started with, they ended with, even though they had the disastrous route in Afghanistan and Lloyd Austin going AWOL, despite the fact that you had a State Department that was saying the Middle East is safer than it's been in decades. And then like 2 weeks later, Hamas commits the October 7th massacres and touches off a regional war.
And Biden saying he regretted appointing Merrick Garland.
And Mayorkas and border security, nobody paid any sort of consequences for failure. Now, that you may not like Donald Trump, but he does actually hold people accountable for failure and
disloyalty.
and disloyalty too. And that's not necessarily a great thing, but there is accountability at least. And we haven't seen any of that for 4 years, just like we didn't see that scene in the Oval Office in 4 years.
That's right. Very good point. Yeah.
I was actually really enjoying that live coverage. And I was almost at that point saying, I kind of want to watch something else. I need to take a breather. We just finished the live blogging. And I was like, I'm really tired. I've been doing this one particular thing all day long. I'd like to do something else for a little while. But then I thought, I know he's going back over to the White House to do the EOs. And I'm kind of curious as to whether or not he's going to make remarks, or they're just going to put a camera up and show him. And I thought, if all they have is a camera up and he's doing the EOs, I'll just turn it off. But it was actually really interesting to watch him interact with the press, kind of, joke around with them at times, scold the one reporter for not knowing what bricks meant, which was interesting. And generally just showing that he was in charge. Competent, in charge, right? Whether or not you like him or not, he's at least there. He's present. Yeah. I was actually pretty happy about that.
And we have a first lady back in office that's gracious, graceful.
Yeah, I generally don't like to get into first ladies too much, except Jill Biden was obviously the ringleader of the conspiracy of silence around Joe Biden's dementia. Just obviously.
Yeah.
Just by sheer position. She clearly knew. She was clearly running that whole thing. She was Edith Wilson. And only, I think, really for an entire presidency.
For a lot of it. And, if you look back at some of the campaign things from 2020, you can see Biden coming out of a new bend and reporters shouting questions at him, and he would open his mouth to answer. And that there would be a woman with him, not Jill. It looked like Nurse Cratchit. It would be there would be a woman in an overcoat just take his arm and push him another way, like the bunny rabbit did at the Easter egg roll. It just, to me, that was the warning. And of course, everybody was so anti-Trump at the time that, not everybody, but the Democrats were, that they didn't want to see that. And welcome to the parade.
Yeah, welcome to the parade. Welcome to the welcome to reality, right? It's So before we wrap things up, we do want to talk about your other VIP thing, which was about the end of woke on college campuses. I'll believe that when I see it. But also Donald Trump fired off a bunch of EOs about that yesterday.
Yeah, he did. And big, loud promises coming out of the campaign was that he wanted to end woke. And remember, Governor DeSantis said Florida is where woke goes to die. And so I find woke to be extremely corrosive, seditious, actually, in terms of American spirit and exceptionalism, that you don't have to excel. We'll just carry you along no matter what. And there were some signs that I wrote about or spoke about in the audio commentary last week that the tide might be just the first signs of turning. I hope it's true. I hope it lasts. And I hope Trump follows through. And Hegseth does the same thing in the military. Although I have to say, I have some friends in the military who tell me that the DEI woke stuff is all official and it's all the generals, and it did not penetrate into the ranks of the fighters.
Well, I think just getting the generals out of the way, they fired the commander of the Coast Guard today because she was far too, focused on DEI rather than actual interdiction of, drugs.
Yeah. Hello.
Might be your core mission there, one of your core missions. So I think that message is going to get sent loud and clear, no matter whether when or whether Pete Hegseth takes that position. So they're trying to Kavanaugh him right now. I don't know if you saw this, but they've got a they've got a deposition from his brother's wife that says that Pete Hegseth's second wife was afraid for her life when she was married to Pete Hegseth. And Pete Hegseth's wife came out with a statement immediately and said, I didn't ask anybody to speak for me. Your information is inaccurate. There was no physical abuse in our marriage, and I'm not going to say anything more about anything else. So, yeah, this is somebody who's apparently not in with the family very well and wants to make trouble. So,
well, the media will be hungry for that stuff. They won't have a lot. They won't have a lot of people getting fired. Well, I misspoke. They may have some people getting fired, but the people who got fired last time went out and wrote books to make money, and so there was a lot of kiss and tell there. And I think with the people Trump's named this time, I don't think that's as likely to happen.
No, I don't think so either. And this is so transparently, nonsense that they're not going to allow Hegseth to get Kavanaugh. They're going to force Democrats to eat this, and I think it might even galvanize Republicans to make sure that type of thing does not get incentivized in the future. So, at any rate, onward and upward. Do you have any jokes of the week here, or are you so satisfied with the inauguration?
That's true. I wasn't laughing. I was enjoying. And I have to say, I was enjoying the National Football Championship game on the Monday night.
You were. I'm surprised you didn't lead with that one.
Oh, I was ecstatic. And on a personal level, but also for Ohio State. Ohio State. People who live in Ohio understand this. On Saturdays in the fall, everybody's wearing red. Not everybody, but a lot of people wearing red. The grocery stores have special promotions, and they could be hundreds of miles from Columbus and the game. So they will be very happy there, and I hope they will have a huge parade and enjoy the moment. It was especially delightful because they had rough times and they came back from it, and I think that's in the American spirit of you like comebacks. Comebacks are delicious in the American mind. I mean, Pearl Harbor was a comeback. World War II was a comeback, and there have been many since. But Americans like it. They like the Tim Tebow story. They like all kinds of tales that have elements of comeback, and that's what the Buckeyes did. So happy for them, happy for me, and I enjoyed every second of that as much as the inauguration.
I'll bet you did.
Because I can't have it with the Browns, I might as well enjoy it with the Buckeyes.
True enough. But I was, I'm a huge Notre Dame fan, and
I'd forgotten that. We had an unfortunate incident when they recruited our son to wrestle. So they fell out of my favor some time ago. But
I'm sorry.
They had a good team, and Ohio State was just. I mean, it was one of those rare times. It was just packed with so much talent. Stop this guy. There's 3 other guys that are going to pull it off. It's like having a team of Travis Kelce's,
Yeah. I think Notre Dame's got a good core team too, and I think they'll be back. They'll be competitive again next year. So.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Does that quarterback, does he come back, or no? He's just a 1-year rental.
I think he was off the transfer portal, and I don't know that he's.
Yeah, he was. He was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well. Anyway, so there was a little clip that I shared with you of from the Muppet Show of Kermit, and up in the balcony was only Waldorf, and Kermit said, where's Statler? And he said, he's sick. And he said, he's sick. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. What's he sick of? And he said, he's sick of this show.
Yeah, we love Waldorf and Statler here. So I do have a couple jokes for you, though. I do have a couple jokes for you.
Okay, good. Yeah, let's have them.
We'll kick off the new
year.
It's welcome to the psychiatric hotline. Okay, if you are obsessive compulsive, please press 1 repeatedly. If you're codependent, please ask somebody to press 2. If you have multiple personalities, press 3, 4, 5, and 6. If you're paranoid delusional, we know who you are and what you want. Just stay on the line so we can trace the call. If you're schizophrenic, listen carefully and a little voice will tell you which number to press. If you're manic depressive, it doesn't matter what you press, no one will answer. If you're anxious, just start pressing buttons at random. If you're phobic, don't press anything. And if you're anal retentive, please hold.
That's it.
So the next one here is this is my final one. Both of these are from jokesoftheday.net. I love going over there and just perusing the jokes. A man named Donald buys a horse from a farmer for $250. Farmer agrees to deliver the horse the next day. The next day, though, the farmer drives up to Donald's house and says, "Sorry, son, but I've got some bad news. The horse died." And Donald said, "Well, just give me my money back." And the farmer said, "Well, I can't do that. I went and spent it already." Donald said, "Okay, just bring me the dead horse." Farmer said, "What are you going to do with him?" Donald said, "I'm going to raffle him off." And the farmer said, "You can't raffle off a dead horse." And Donald says, "Yeah, sure I can. Watch me." So a month later, the farmer met up with Donald and asked, "So whatever happened with that dead horse?" Donald said, "I raffled him off. I sold 500 tickets at $5 a piece and made a profit of $2,495. And the farmer said, "Well, didn't anyone complain?" He says, Donald says, "Just the guy who won. So I give him back his $5. And Donald just moved back into the White House last night.
Oh, that is a good one.
So that's in honor of our once and current president, Donald Trump. I'm sure that joke was just edited slightly to make it about Donald Trump, but yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
All right. Jokesoftheday.net. And of course, if you want to read what Andrew Malcolm is writing, you go to redstate.com. He is the regent of Red State, and of course, the prince of Twitter as well, at AH Malcolm on the Twitters. Andrew, we'll do it next week on the regular day. So we'll be back.
All right.
Tuesdays.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Happy new administration to, I'm sure the president's listening. Happy to all of them.
Yes, that's right. And to the Biden administration?
So long. Yeah, exactly. So long.
So long.